Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, December 4th, 2014.
I'm Ryan Garner.
I'm Russ Cohen. Buy my book.
I'm Josh Rimmer. I don't think I'll ever have a book.
And I'm sure as hell I'm not going to ever have a book. And this is the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. And no shameless advertising, Russ. Come on.
That's it. That's my one plug.
Okay, guys. A very eventful evening in the NHL last night. A couple streaks that were extended, and I'm sure both teams didn't want them extended, but it happened. First, those good old Edmonton Oilers, Ryan, lose their 11th straight in agonizing fashion in Winnipeg last night at the MTS Center as Dustin Byfuglien ties the game late in the third period. And then Matthew Perreault scores 17 seconds into overtime to give the Jets a 3-2 victory over the Oilers. The Oilers are now 0-12-4 in the Western Conference against Western Conference teams this year. Take it away, Ryan.
Well, last night, it's just become horrendous. Like, the Oilers have been a disaster from the start of the season, but now it's just become a comedy of errors, and how much worse can this get? How much longer can it go? And losing in the way they did, having a 2-1 lead with 3 minutes to go, and watching the game, never feeling at any point that the Oilers were going to win, that they were going to find a way to lose the game. It's pretty disappointing. So, and it was even bad enough last night that I was hoping that they brought the dry scrape back because of the momentum that the Winnipeg Jets had going into the overtime. I'm like, we need a timeout. We need to just halt this a little bit. And, of course, their first shot of overtime, it's in the net behind Ben Scriven. So it's really disappointing, and even more disappointing that no one from the organization has come out to address anything in the way of a statement, a press release, anything to at least throw the fans a bone that, hey, we're with you, hey, we know what's going on, we're sticking with something, anything, right? To at least give people some confidence that there's some competency at the top of the organization. So on we go. Back-to-backs against San Jose and Anaheim coming up next week, and it will only get worse before it gets better.
Russ, I know that Andrew Ferentz, the captain of the Oilers, came out a few days ago and just, ripped didn't name names specifically, but ripped the team. Said that their effort was a joke. Certain players were not trying as up to what they could. There's been questions about whether Dallas Eakins is going to be replaced. We talked about it yesterday about the possibility of Craig McTavish stepping behind the bench. I mean, at this point, I'll say what I said yesterday. I mean, at this point, there is a pot at the end of the rainbow at the end of this year, and I know Edmonton doesn't want to end up with another number one pick and continue this situation, but McDavid or Eichel might be different than some of the guys that they've drafted, and they're so far behind right now. Maybe that is the course to go for the rest of this year, and status quo, and go where the chips fall where they may.
Well, I'll tell you what. Ryan, if you're looking for guarantees, I'd say stick with Canadian Tire.
Yeah.
As far as the Oilers, trying to keep journalistic integrity intact for me, I said last year I didn't like the way that team practices. I'd seen a few practices. I didn't like the way they were coached. I spoke to Nail Yakupov. He told me stuff off the record. He's since sort of made some of that public. And I don't think Dallas Eakins has really done anything to make them better. He's made them worse. But I will also tell you that I think it was Eakins that wanted to go and get Ben Scriven, who I never thought is a 1A goalie.
Yeah.
And so I think you've got that problem too. So the problems are mounting, and they're mounting to the point where, okay, coaching isn't great. Okay, drafting. Everything you said yesterday about them not drafting well after the first round is intact. It's true. Mitch Moroz will be like the only exception in the last couple of years. He'll make it to the NHL. Probably be a fourth liner, but he'll make it. So you look at that. They don't have a goalie. They don't have a lot of defensemen. So, Mike, it's a situation where they need so much.
Mm-hmm.
You could give them Connor McDavid, and what will that get them? 7 wins? And that's being really generous. So they're
I mean,
set back for many years, I believe.
I mean, I didn't agree with the approach last year. Now, the thing is, Scrivens played well last year at the end of the year. Again, that was sort of in garbage time when there really wasn't any consequence. I mean, and Akins and Scrivens have history going back to the Toronto Marlies, and I do think he's an NHL goaltender, but I never thought he was a number one goaltender. And Victor Fost is not a number one goaltender. I mean, they missed their opportunity this year with free agency, and I don't know whether they could have thrown enough money at Ryan Miller or Jonas Hiller to get them to go to Edmonton, but that was the missed opportunity. They needed stability in the net. And Ryan, again, going back to Nikita Nikitin at $4.5 million, Justin Schultz, who has not improved defensively over now in his third year. I mean, that's
good defensively, though, right? I mean, does anybody here think he was ever going to be good defensively? You would just hope for 40 points, and I thought that was kind of like a pie in the sky, considering he was coming from a college schedule to the pros and didn't have a lot of mileage on him even in college, so I felt like he was kind of green anyhow.
Yeah, exactly, because he's kind of a poor man's Brian Rafalski in some ways, right? Where you're not getting a whole lot of the defensive upside, but they're looking for him to work the power play and give some offense. And that's the problem with the Oilers is that how we say this player is a poor man's this player? The Oilers are a poor man's NHL hockey team. That's what it is. You have half the roster is just happy to be playing in the NHL, doesn't really belong there, and the other half is adequate but hasn't had any success at the NHL level. You can count on probably 3 fingers the number of players who have even ever been on a winning team in the NHL, and that really goes to the coaching staff as well, right? You have a rookie coach, like first-time NHL coach. You have Craig McTavish learning as he goes how to be a general manager, and the mistakes are piling up, just like Russ said. It's become laughable.
Josh, you got some news?
Yeah, we actually have some news out of Edmonton. Sportsnet Spec tweeting, much discussion going on within Oilers organization. Everything on the table. Stay tuned. So I don't know if that means that we could see a coaching change today or something happening, or
that could be a Christmas party.
Yeah.
They could be selling 2-for-1 Gretzky and Messier jerseys at the Oilers apparel store. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, okay. I mean, okay. Let's just take a quick poll here. It's either going to be a trade or it's going to be Akins being replaced. I continue to say that they're going to make a deal before they fire the coach. That's my vote.
They're going to lowball the Oilers. I mean, everyone and their sister knows that the Oilers need to do something, and everyone's going to lowball these guys. I mean,
well, yeah, I agree with that, but I mean, there's got to be some deal out there that would be considered an even swap. I mean, Ryan, do you think it'll be? What do you think the first move will be? Do you think it'll be coaching, or do you think it'll be roster?
I don't think it'll be coaching because so much of the rhetoric coming out of Edmonton the last couple of weeks has been, well, it's not Dallas Aikens' fault at all because he doesn't have the horses, he doesn't have the players. And there's an argument to be made there, but he deserves a good portion of the blame as well because as a coach, your bare expectation, no matter what your roster looks like, you should be able to have more success than the worst season on record in your franchise. And right now, the Oilers are on pace for the worst all-time season in franchise history. And so you can't look at them on paper and say, well, far and away, this is the worst team we've ever had on paper. So, I mean, you have to look at the coaching, you have to look at management and the players, the whole ball of wax. So the first domino I see falling is a trade, and I think Jordan Eberle is the one to go. I don't think I think the Oilers see more value in Nail Yakupov than they actually have there, and I think other teams say, well, the guy doesn't have any NHL resume, right? It's all projection. It's all potential. And sorry, but we're trading low on potential. So Jordan Eberle, at least he has a track record there where he can produce. He has that offensive skill. He's the carrot the Oilers are going to dangle to look to shake up their roster, I think.
And you can get a lot of value back for him.
Yeah.
Russ, what do you think? Coaching or roster?
I think it's going to be the same day. I really think they are going to make a coaching move and make a trade on the same day, or it'll be like the next day the trade will happen. I think the coaching move will happen couple things. I think you can't run an organization and worry about being embarrassed because you just fired a coach that didn't work out, which clearly that's what they're going through right now. And it's dumb, right? Because they ran Ralph Kruger out of town, and you go back and look at Eberle's numbers, Yakupov's numbers, everybody's numbers were way better under Kruger. Kruger's record and winning percentage was better than Aiken's, and he got run out of town saying he can't coach. So now the next coach is even worse, and they're going to hold on to him longer just because they don't want to be embarrassed. So to me, that's sort of a big mistake. I think Eberle will be the guy that gets traded, but I'll also say this about Yakupov. He doesn't get enough shots a game. He doesn't get to play with the right players. You got to just wait until those things are in place for him, because every time I see him, he still has the best shot on that team and one of the best shots in the league, and I wouldn't, necessarily give up on that.
Josh, you had something?
Well, I just wanted to say, Eberle, let's keep in mind here, is like a folk hero in Canada. I mean, this is the guy that won gold for Canada at the World Juniors a couple times and scored some big goals. I wonder if there will be backlash if he's traded, if fans will be up in arms, because
Not at all. Fans in Edmonton are fed up with the guy. He doesn't bring any physicality, and compared to Taylor Hall and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, I mean, he's third banana and not a very good one when you look at his numbers and what he's actually giving the team this season.
The deal that Edmonton has to make, and this will be the last word because I want to move on from Oilers buzz, but the deal that has to be made here is they have to get a 2-for-1 for Eberle, get themselves a forward who can play two-way, and get themselves a defenseman. If it's a 1-for-1 swap, I don't see any benefit in that. I mean, unless the one they're getting back is better than him, and I don't see that as a possibility. And they need to get numbers. Depth is a problem. They have top end talent, but I think they have to sacrifice a little top end talent to get quality depth on like the second and third lines and the second and third defensive pairings. Now, I'm not saying trade him for a 5-6 defenseman, but you need quality depth, and I don't think they're going to get a number 1 or number 2 defenseman for Jordan Eberle unless the Leafs are trading Jake Gardner or something like that nature, or Tyler Myers with the Sabres. But we'll see. The other team that extended their streak last night was the Philadelphia Flyers. Now have lost 9 games on the road in a row. They're 0-7-2. But Wayne Simmons did score a goal with 1.8 seconds remaining in regulation to get the game tied, and then Anaheim wins in the shootout. Russ, I mean, you cover the Flyers regularly, and I know we talked about it yesterday, but I mean, do you think this is, again, same question, is it coach that goes first, or is it a trade?
Well, I think because trades are hard to make, I say it's the coach that goes first, because, Ron Hextall, that's not his guy. He inherited him. So he's trying to make the best of a bad situation at this point. He doesn't want to make a wrong move and really hurt his future. So he's being careful about trades, and we don't know what trades he's being offered. But I'll tell you what, early in that game yesterday, when they were being completely 100% dominated, I felt like the game plan was, let's be tough, let's be gritty, let's everybody play defense, and they weren't creating any offense. They got a few goals in that game. A couple of them were, maybe the last one was lucky. I mean, sure, you got to be in the right place to get that luck. But at the end of the day, I look at that game and say, that was a flawed game plan, and you never want that team to get into the shootout. And I felt like that game plan was devised to get a point or a loss, and they got both. And I said that, I even texted that to someone. I'll even be honest about that, because I could just see the way they were playing. There was just way too much focus on finishing checks and defense, and there can be some focus on that, don't get me wrong. But in this NHL, when you're playing a team that can really skate the way Anaheim can and can really press you, even with their defensemen, that's not the way to beat them. You can't, and so they played a good game, but not good enough, and bad teams find ways to lose.
Ryan, the thing I don't understand about the Flyers, and I predicted the Flyers to be one of those teams, that we did an over-under at the beginning of the season, and I thought they were going to be a playoff team and they were going to be over their number. The thing I can't understand about them, and we've noticed their defensive problems over the years, but they're not scoring. I mean, if it's not Giroux or Voracek, who's like at the top of the league right now, they're not getting offense out of Reed, out of Couturier, out of Braden Shen. out of the. It's just not happening, and it's really surprising because this one of the things that I thought was dependable for the Flyers was their offensive depth, their forward depth.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, it's frustrating because you're seeing these guys who have enough experience. They've been in the league a few years now, and they should be taking that next step. And when you don't, when they don't, I think it's a similar situation in Edmonton. You kind of have to put that on the coaching staff because it's not enough to develop players just to get into the NHL. Your development continues. I mean, I hear people say, whenever we discuss whether 18-year-olds belong in the league, people will say the NHL is not a developmental league. And that's BS because every player is developing every single day and should be. And we should see guys extending and expanding on their career numbers every year, especially when they're 22, 23 years old. And when they're stagnated, when they're not producing, when they're not advancing and developing, I think that's a direct indictment of the coaching staff there. And, maybe that needs to be the change to shake that team up and inject some new blood in there.
Well, I mean, we've had enough rumors about those two teams, Philadelphia and Edmonton, making a deal. I mean, it's a possibility, and I think there might be a marriage there that each team could help each other. But the funny thing is that their weakness. I mean, there's similarities in terms of weakness. They're both, so they can't help each other there. It would basically be an exchange of forwards, and maybe that's what's needed. But we'll see. In some other news from yesterday, Robert Bortuzzo was suspended 2 games for the hit on Jaromir Jagr. I think that was pretty much a reasonable suspension for a hit that was a little bit late. The other news was the LA Kings signing defenseman Alec Martinez to a 6-year extension at $4 million per. And Russ, this just continues the cavalcade of unrestricted free agents falling off the list for next July. I think he would have been a pretty focal point for teams looking for a defenseman under the age of 30. And Marco Scandella gets signed for about the same amount earlier on the weekend. And now the Kings have 4 defensemen over $4 million going into next year. Doughty, Voyanov, who we know that situation right now, Jake Muzzin, and Martinez, which would lead me to believe, with all the Mike Richards stuff out there, that it's almost a guarantee that Mike Richards is going to be gone either before the deadline or over the summer.
Yeah, Richards is going to go. Before I get into that, though, I do want to say one thing about the Bortuzzo thing. Shame on Facebook, because on Facebook today they took some money out for a paid ad that from some company that basically was showing the hit and basically acting like, hey, this is a great hockey hit. And you see Jagr face down in the ice, and it's like, if Facebook really needs the money that bad, they should really look at what sort of ads they're taking, because that was it disgusted me, I'll be honest. But moving on from that, as far as this goes, the Rangers are in the same situation, right? Do they really want to give this kind of money now to Mark Stahl and be the same place as the Kings? Now, can the Kings get away with this? Yes, because they have one of the deepest, if not the deepest, farm system in the league. Michael Fuda has done a tremendous job there. He's an assistant GM. He wants to continue to be an assistant GM there. He is not going anywhere, and he keeps getting them gems like Tyler Toffoli and so on. So the more gems that you can bring up and are under basically entry-level contracts, the more you can lock up your defense core and get away with it. But not every team can do that because they don't produce talent like the Kings. So I think teams are way overpaying for defensemen, but we're in this era now where unless you're getting one like Aaron Ekblad, you have to wait 3, 4, 5 years under these systems, the way everything's getting so complicated. Mm-hmm. So they're sort of like the quarterbacks of the league now, and all of a sudden defensemen are number one. I mean, never was that when I was a kid. Obviously, the offensive players and the goalies, there was more focus on, and I think now teams are starting to focus less on goalies and as far as big salaries, and now they seem to be throwing it all at defense and just coming up with defensive schemes. So, yeah, they're taking all these guys off the board. Martinez is a good defenseman. Is he great? No. He's not getting paid great money, but he's getting paid pretty well for what he does. And so right now, if you're a puck-moving defenseman in the league and you can play a little defense, that's it, man. That's as good a job as it used to be a left-handed reliever in baseball or a backup catcher.
Ryan, I mean, I look at in the Rangers situation. I mean, I think they let Anton Strawman go so they could possibly sign Mark Stahl because they wouldn't have the room for both. But they have McDonough signed long term for big money. They have Girardi signed long term for big money. Dan Boyle's under contract for a couple more years, and I mean, he's had a couple injuries. I don't think it's with the cap staying the same around, and then we're going to find out next week whether that's the case. With the cap staying around the same, around $69 million, I don't know how teams are going to be able to afford 4 defensemen making over $4 million.
Yeah, I have no idea. The market is really strange, right? Because guys are being overvalued, guys are being overpaid, and at some point you get rosters that are totally bottom heavy, right? Because you say, well, we're building from the back end out, but when we're paying $4 or $5 million to third pairing defensemen, you really don't have anywhere to go, right? Especially when those guys, I mean, we're in an era now where you don't really see shut-down defensemen the way you did maybe 10, 15 years ago. You see guys who are hybrids, guys who are puck movers, players who can move the puck on the power play, things like that, and they're not real physical. They're kind of tweener-type guys. And it's interesting to see those guys getting a lot of money because you look around the league, they're pretty much interchangeable, right? And I know the Rangers had a guy like that in Del Zotto, right, that they invested a lot of time into, and eventually they said, we've seen what this guy's going to be. We're not all that impressed, right, because he's not an elite talent. He's not among those top power play guys, and he's not giving you enough defense and physicality to really justify the dollar amount. So I think there are a lot of those guys, especially in the Eastern Conference and the Metro Division, where these teams have to figure out their identity, and the sooner they do that, they can kind of establish, okay, this is the price point, this is what we have, and I think you're seeing a lot of teams take flyers on guys early and inject young defensemen into their lineup just because they don't want to pay the premium for guys who have 6 to 10 years experience in the league, and they're going to command big dollars.
Yeah, I think Toronto's doing that with Morgan Riley right now. They have him on the entry-level deal. He's in the second year. He's got one more to go. But they face a dilemma because Cody Franzen's a UFA at the end of the year. They have Polak making almost $3 million. They have Robidas making $3 million. Phaneuf making $7 million, and they just signed Gardner for $4 million.
All right.
Yeah, I know. But the thing is, I think they can afford to pay Gardner or Franzen, but not both of them. And they have some young defensemen in their system that I think they could get away with trading a guy like Gardner or letting a Franzen go and bringing one of those young guys up. And financially, I think they're going to have to do that because they can't afford to pay 4 defensemen. Actually, they're paying 5 defensemen, or would be over $3 million, and I think that's a recipe for disaster. So we'll see.
Agents are at play here too. Let's not take them off the hook because, as an example, with the Rangers, right? I was telling people late last year that they should have traded Stahl at the draft, gotten a first rounder or a piece for him, and signed Strawman long term. They didn't do that. So now they're in a situation where Stahl asked for that extension over the summer, the same way that Jordan Stahl did. They have the same agent. He doesn't get it. He's rolled into the season now. Of course, the team needs him, right? Because you always need a Mark Stahl. It's not like he's the same, but he's still very good. But now what are you going to do? They're probably going to Callahan him, for a lack of a better term, right? And so at the end of the day, are they going to get more value for him now at the trading deadline, or would they have gotten more for him at the draft? They would have gotten more at the draft. I mean, that's in my estimation. So I think the agent's playing that against the team right now, knowing that Glenn Sader will not pay Stahl more than Dan Girardi money. Right. He's pretty much said it, and now that line's in the sand, and you are where you are.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto is in the same problem. I mean, if they're in the playoff race in March, if the Rangers are in the playoff race in March at the deadline, do they trade Stahl or not? Because if they trade Stahl, more than likely, unless they have somebody coming up from Hartford that's fantastic, I think that would be...
Matt Bodie's good. He's not fantastic, but Matt Bodie can play a little bit.
Right, and like I said, the Leafs do have some young defensemen who might be ready, but the thing is, Cody Franzen is on their top pairing right now with Dion Phaneuf. He's on their power play. He's a right-hand shot defenseman having probably a career year. I mean, if they move him they probably and they're close to falling out of the playoff race. It probably costs them a playoff spot. So it's going to be very big dilemma for some GMs whether to trade their UFAs and get a draft pick coming back or hold on to them, risk losing them for nothing going into the off season. But we'll see. Wanted to move on to Daniel Alfredsson, who announced his retirement this morning. The 41-year-old, I believe, he will skate in the pregame skate tonight before the game with the New York Islanders, and they'll have a ceremony at the Canadian Tire Center in Canada. Alfredsson is 444 goals in 1,246 games, 1,157 points. Reached the Stanley Cup final once with the Senators in 2007. Russ, we talked about this a little before the webcast. I think he's a borderline Hall of Famer, but I can see the case against it. You did not buy into that scenario. Give me your thoughts.
Well, I mean, again, this is where we get into this discussion of the Hall of Very Good or the Hall of Excellence, and maybe not even the hockey. It should be the Hockey Hall of Fame. It shouldn't be the NHL Hall of Fame, but we know the NHL counts the highest and the most. And so you look at him, and he's not a point-a-game player. He's not a 500-goal scorer. He's a very good player, very well-liked, very well-respected.
Except in Toronto.
Yeah, took the money. I mean, let's not canonize him. He basically went to Detroit for the money, and he had enough money being offered to him in Ottawa, but he felt disrespected, so he left. So now he's coming back. They're giving him the hero's welcome. That's all well and good. I think he's deserving of that. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. And I remember you wanted us to mention the favorite moment. I was at the All-Star game in Ottawa, and people just went berserk with him on the ice, and so that was nice, and I felt like he was deserving of that. But again, he went to Detroit and took the money. He really did.
Ryan, what is your most vivid memory of Alfredsson, and also give me your impression about whether he'll eventually get into the Hall of Fame or not?
Well, the most vivid memory I have, I mean, there are a lot of them, because for some reason, I watched a lot of Senators games, and he was there forever, right? Yeah. And you always remember him with the long hair and everything when he came into the league, right? Kind of looked a little different, played a little different, and the moment that stands out in my mind, though, is the overtime goal, that Game 5 overtime goal that he had during the Senators Cup run there, and or in the 2007. And that goal is kind of like, it's nice when you have a guy who's the face of the franchise, and he gets rewarded with a moment like that, creates it, because there are a lot of times, teams will have an overtime goal scored by a third liner, and no one, they only remember him for that and nothing else, and kind of the team's elite players don't really factor into those massive moments in franchise history. Mm-hmm. So it's nice. It was kind of fitting that was a big one for him, and I know Senators fans look back on it fondly. But as far as the Hall of Fame goes, it is the Hall of Fame, and it should be reserved for the elites. It should be reserved for those guys who were the best at their position when they played, and I don't think anyone would ever say Alfredsson was that. We have a similar situation. I think Canadian markets, more than most, they want that guy, that fan favorite, to represent their franchise in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I know the Oilers had the same thing with Ryan Smith, who was drafted the same year, who will not be a Hall of Famer, but I know a lot of people would like to see it because he means so much to them because they watched him for so long, face the franchise type guy, and Alfredsson's the same way. Great, good player, fantastic player, but not at that level where you're saying Hall of Fame.
See, it's funny because my most vivid memories of Daniel Alfredsson happen to be negative. I mean, him.
That's no surprise.
Him ramming Darcy Tucker from behind into the boards during the playoffs. I think it was in 2004.
2006.
It was it was during a playoff series.
Oh, sorry, that's right. They were in the playoffs then.
Yeah, it was either 2002 or 2004. I can't remember which year it was, but I think it was.
And he scored the game winner right after Duggan.
And he scored the game winner on the same on the same play, a continuation of the play as Tucker was crumpled in the corner. And then in '07, his famous shooting of the puck at Scott Niedermayer at the end of the second period. And he did the same thing to Henrik Tolinder in Buffalo in the I think it was the '07 playoff when they beat the Sabres to go to the Stanley Cup final. So I mean, the funny thing was he's a skilled player. He was a small player, but he also had that sort of thing where, you know, that Dale Hunter sort of aspect of him that I'm sure Ottawa fans loved him, but people in Buffalo and people in Toronto hated him with a passion. And part of that's respect, but part of that also is the fact that he was just, I think, a very subtly dirty player. But you know, I mean, I think he's borderline, and as I said to Russ before we started recording, I think, you know, the NHL Hall, the Hockey Hall of Fame it has become the Hall of the Very Good with guys like Bernie Federko and Clark Gillies getting in. So with them getting in, I think there's a possibility that down the line he will get in. And with more Swedes being let in, now it's Salming, Sundin, and Forsberg. I don't think Alfredsson is as good as any of those three, but I think the door is open for more European players to make the Hall of Fame. So I think there's a possibility. So we'll see.
Were you getting a little choked up there on Alfredsson?
Oh yeah, I did. My emotions were just getting the best of me. I couldn't control myself. The tears were starting to well up. You know, I remember him with a long hair. He looked like Bozo the Clown or Krusty the Clown, or Toronto fans refer to him as Danielle Alfredsson and a few other things. But yeah, it's not gonna be the same without Danny Alfredsson in the NHL. Oh boy. Anyway, let's move on.
Clearing your throat there. I thought maybe you were getting a little.
Yeah. No, I was just getting choked up. Sorry. Okay, let's move to our buy or sell section of the show here. Number one, the Blackhawks used a 3-goal third period rally to defeat the Blues at the United Center on Wednesday. Jake Allen made 29 saves on the night, but to me was not particularly strong in the third period, which is leading Ken Hitchcock to go with the recently signed Marty Brodeur in Nashville tonight. You know, gee, let's throw him in against the division leader. Not an easy opponent there, or whatever. Buy or sell, Marty Brodeur will be a member of the Blues the rest of the season. Russ?
Buy. Look, they didn't sign him to not use him, and while Jake Allen is a nice goalie, just having Marty Brodeur on your bench makes your team better, even if he's not playing, just from what he'll spot on the ice and tell Elliott when he's back. So I think it's a positive in that regard. I also think they'll beef up the team meal, so that's another thing that'll be a positive because Marty likes his food. But all kidding aside, I think it looked a little sad today to see that picture on Twitter. I go back to my childhood, and one of my favorite players was Joe Namath, and I remember seeing him in a Rams uniform. Yeah. And so now seeing Brodeur in that Blues uniform, my first thought was sadness. And then I said, all right, look, I mean, the Blues have had old goalies before. The last time they made the Stanley Cup, right, they had Jacques Plante and Glenn Hall, and they were all around Brodeur's age. So anything's possible. Hitchcock certainly likes veterans, and I think Hitchcock will give him every opportunity. I do.
Yeah, it's like Johnny Unitas in a San Diego Charger jersey. That was, I mean, not that I was like 2 years old when that happened, but whatever. Ryan,
I'm buying it.
You're buying it.
I'm absolutely buying this, and I think he takes the ball and runs with it. I think he not only is he on the team, but he is going to be their starter and establish himself as their starter as they head into the playoffs. So I'm excited to see it. I don't think this is going to be a situation like we had with Marty Turco a few years ago where he was sitting on the sidelines, came in, flamed out almost immediately. I think Brodeur, he has something to prove, and he's a competitive guy. We know that. We obviously all know the pedigree and the resume he has there. And, hey, he was pretty much begging for a chance. He's got it, and I see him making the most of it to the detriment of Jake Allen's development and maybe leading to some difficult decisions once Brian Elliott does come back. But it's a good problem to have, right, when you have three goaltenders who can all play. I think Brodeur is going to prove that there's still a lot left in the tank there, at least for this season.
Yeah, I'm buying it as well. I'm curious what Doug Armstrong is going to do in relation to the three goaltenders, because I believe Jake Allen's options are done. He can't go down to the AHL without clearing waivers because he was down there for 3 years. And carrying three goaltenders doesn't make a lot of sense. I know everybody makes a big deal about the practice situation about two goaltenders rotating at one end of the ice. It's how it doesn't go with the flow of the practice and it just leads to problems. I would think that Brodeur is going to be there for the rest of the year. And maybe if Brodeur proves that he is up to it, that they maybe trade Elliott to a number of teams that need goaltenders, Edmonton, or any other ones, and then they go with Brodeur as basically the veteran backup to Allen, and it's not a bad option to have Marty Brodeur to go to if Allen falters down the stretch, but we'll see. Josh, did you have one?
Yeah, no, I mean, do I?
Buy or sell? Sorry.
I want to say sell, and the reason I want to say sell is because Doug Armstrong today on Sportsnet telling them that Brodeur is showcasing himself for the rest of the league. Now, does that mean that after they get, hopefully when they get Brian Elliott back, do they think that they're going to be able to move Brodeur to another team and be able to showcase him a bit, showing that he can still play? I found that interesting that he would be so transparent in saying that he's showcasing himself for the rest of the league. I don't think he's going to be there.
Well, if he's showcasing himself for the rest of the league, if he plays well enough, I can't see Armstrong or Hitchcock letting him go. That's the thing. If he plays up to the level of Marty Brodeur, the way he performed 2 years ago when the Devils got to the 2012 when they got to the finals.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Some players have that. We mentioned Jacques Plante and Glenn Hall. Those two goaltenders were written off when they went to St. Louis in '68, and they carried the Blues to. It's a different era, I understand, but they carried the Blues to the finals for 2 or 3 years. So it's not impossible with that really solid defense that the Blues have that Brodeur could have some success, and the experience that he has is fantastic. So we'll see. Number 2, the Latvian laser Zemgus Girgensons, Buffalo Sabres forward, leads the NHL in voting for the upcoming All-Star game, ahead of such names as Crosby, Taves, and PK Subban. Girgensons, he's a fine young forward, 20 years old. He's having a decent year, 8 goals and 6 assists, but apparently this is a campaign out of Latvia. According to Hockey Central this afternoon, they said that 1 million votes have come out of Latvia for Mr. Girgensons. And it's clearly some sort of ballot stuffing thing. I think he's going to be the Sabres representative in the All-Star game, but buy or sell, will Girgensons be voted in as one of the top players for the game in Columbus? Ryan?
I'm buying it, absolutely, because who's going to derail this Latvian train? Come on, it's a fun thing, let's go. No one cares about... I can't even tell you guys the last time I actually voted on the All-Star game, who would be participating. I know some people love it, I know it's exciting to see all the best players in the league on the same ice, but it doesn't do a whole lot for me, and hey, who doesn't love Zemgus Girgensons? Come on, really.
Russ, I know somebody who will derail it. That's probably Vladimir Putin. He doesn't like anything coming out of the Baltic states. What do you think? Girgensons will be voted in? What do you think?
He's going to get voted in, but again, I just kind of wish it wasn't like this. I do like the All-Star game. Look, it's a skills competition, and I get it, but it is fun with all those players there. I've been covering it for a long time. Fans definitely still like it, except for when they had their superhero moment, and that was pretty awful, the Guardian Project. But other than that, there's been a lot of great moments. And I think the issue with this is you could vote as many times as you want. I think you're up to 10 times a person. I just wish they would tweak that system a little, whatever it is. If it's 3 times a person, to me it should only be 1 vote a person. That's it. And then if he's getting 1 million votes from Latvia, fine, put him in. But a couple of years ago, Jody Shelley was getting a lot of votes, and I knew the guy that was behind that. And what would everybody have done if Jody Shelley had been voted in as a starter? Now, Girgensons is a lot better player than Jody Shelley, and Jody's pretty good in the media, by the way. I've noticed that. But what would they have said then? So I think at some point you can make a mockery out of it.
Well, the most recent glaring campaign like this was the Rory Fitzpatrick thing, which was a joke. I mean, wasn't he? He was like, I mean, he used to play for the Sabres, and he was a seventh defenseman for them, and I think he was with Vancouver at the time, and they were just stuffing the ballot boxes for him. And I have a feeling the NHL sort of like did something to like get that on the side of the road and not allow him to get him voted in, and because that would have been a joke. But I'm buying this.
Put up like a blockade on the internet superhighway.
Exactly. I'm for this. I'm buying it, and I hope that it happens to illustrate how big of a joke the All-Star game is, because I've never been a fan of it. You know, I think the only one that I've ever held in any kind of high regard was at '81 when Gordie Howe was in the All-Star game with Gretzky, and that one was great because it was historical. It was at the Olympia in Detroit. I mean, that's great. Most of the time, it's boring as hell. Even the skills competition has gotten boring. I don't care. I wish they would skip the All-Star game and just eliminate it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm raining on everybody's parade, but I think it'll happen. You know, the internet bandits in downtown Riga will be stuffing the ballot boxes even more. Josh, do you have a buy or sell on this?
Well, I agree with you on the All-Star game, and especially the skills competition. I've been saying this for the last 3 years. I'm sorry, but when I see Corey Perry taking out a mini stick out of his hockey pants to go on a breakaway, it just doesn't interest me. I mean, it's maybe funny for a second, but after that, it's lame. I find the All-Star game lame.
I got more enjoyment out of
Columbus this year.
I got more enjoyment out of hearing Josh describe Corey Perry taking a mini stick out of his hockey.
Oh boy, we're going blue on the HockeyBuzzCast. Okay. Coaching situations in Edmonton, Philadelphia, Toronto, and San Jose have come up in the first quarter of the season, and the name of former Pittsburgh head coach Dan Bylsma has been mentioned as a possibility in all of them. I mean, it seems his name is the first name that keeps cropping up whenever a coach is in trouble. Bylsma did win a Stanley Cup in '09 with the Penguins, but he had problems getting them deep in the playoffs, and he had Crosby and Malkin on that team. So and he also didn't do particularly well in my mind in the Olympics with Team USA. Buy or sell, Russ? Bylsma will be coaching in the NHL this season.
Oh, I'm totally buying it. I think there's more at play in Pittsburgh than I think people realize. First thing is dealing with all those personalities. That is the toughest locker room in the league to deal with personality-wise, with the media crush, with everything else. That's something as a coach that you don't even think you would have to deal with, and yet you have to deal with that every moment. Plus, you have an owner that definitely meddles. If you don't think Mario Lemieux is meddling on an everyday or weekly basis on what goes on with that team, you're crazy. And I think Bylsma had to put up with that too and never ever said anything about it. And listen, that's my own conjecture, but I feel that goes on. And knowing how Mario is and doesn't like to lose, I'm pretty sure when they were losing, he was making phone calls and going in the locker room and doing all kinds of things to try and fix that team. So I look at it that way.
Ryan, your thoughts? Bylsma, will he have a job by the end of before the end of the season?
I think he will, because he's come out and said, I'm just waiting for the phone to ring, right? And usually when we have coaches who are playing that waiting game, they kind of lay low. They don't say too much. They're usually on a TSN panel somewhere, right? And that's about as much talking as they do. But it was interesting just in reading some of his comments in the last couple of weeks to say, I'm ready to go. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm not used to this at all. I'm having trouble getting into the routine of not having, someone to work for. And so he's obviously the top candidate right at the top of the list. I don't know who it's going to be. It's hard to pinpoint exactly which coach is going to be the first to fall. I still maintain, just as I did before the season, that there will not be any coaches fired this season. So I will say that Bylsma will not have a job by the end of the year, but it's looking a little bit iffy at the moment. Right?
Ryan, that's an impossibility, and you know it.
Wishful thinking, Russ.
Yeah, I see. I'm selling it. I don't know. In certain situations, I mean, maybe a San Jose, but Doug Wilson came out vehemently against firing McClelland during the year, and I think it'll only be as a last resort. I don't see Bausma as a fit in Edmonton. I definitely don't see him as a fit in Toronto. Philadelphia would be weird. I mean, obviously he's former Pittsburgh coach, and that would just add to the Philadelphia-Pittsburgh hatred. I mean, Rick Tocchet. I mean, Russ, we experienced that at the draft in Philadelphia. Rick Tocchet goes from the Flyers broadcasting to the Pittsburgh Penguins as an assistant coach, and gets so booed that I couldn't even hear myself think.
But I can tell you that the organization does not care about those things. They do not. If they like Bylsma, they'll hire Bylsma. They won't care about that.
Right. Josh, what do you think? Buy or sell Bylsma having a job by the end of the season?
Well, I think Bylsma is going to be in Edmonton, so I'm going to buy. There's been rumors out there before that Bylsma has spoken to the Oilers management or ownership or something. I know that was out there a couple of weeks ago that they were talking about Bylsma as a possibility in Edmonton. I really believe that's where he's going.
Dan Bylsma is going to go into Edmonton and say, I want you guys to play wide open offense.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Last of the buy and sell. Among the biggest surprises this season has been the Calgary Flames, who are currently in third spot in the Pacific Division with 34 points, based mostly on great goaltending from Jonas Hiller and the defensive pairing of Mark Giordano and T.J. Brody. But they are ahead of teams that most experts predicted would be in the playoff race: L.A., San Jose, and Minnesota. Buy or sell, Ryan? The Calgary Flames will make the postseason. Remember, Sean Vetter is watching.
Why do you do this to me, Mike? Because I have to be honest, and as much as I hate to say it, the Flames are legitimate. They are going to make the playoffs this year. I know everyone, all the Corsi dorks are waiting for the implosion. I know everyone's waiting for the Toronto Maple Leafs 2.0 this year, and it's going to be a flaming train wreck by April, but you watch this team play, and they never quit. And I don't care what name is on the back of the jerseys. I don't care what scrub is scoring hat tricks that people say, oh, that's impossible. When you have a team, any team, I don't care how much talent they have, whenever you have an NHL team that is a hard out every single night, regardless of the score, whether they're down 3 goals with a minute to go or not, you have a chance to win every night, and the Flames have proven it. You got to tip your cap to them. I see them making the playoffs, absolutely.
Well, that Maple Leafs 2.0 description is erroneous because at least the Flames try all the time. When the Leafs try, they win. When they don't try, they lose, and that's been their record all the way along. Russ, do you buy or sell Calgary making the postseason?
No, I'm going to sell it. I like what they've done. They do have some young guys that have infused some energy. Hiller is playing great. Hiller never stays healthy. The minute Hiller goes down, and he will, and he always does, who's going to be in there? Is it Cariramo? Like, who's going to save the day if they're in playoff position and then all of a sudden they have to hang on to it? I just think they're going to hold on to that like grim death, but in the end, they're going to come up short.
Yeah, Trevor Kidd's going to come out of retirement. Josh, buy or sell? Calgary making the playoffs?
I'm going to say buy. I like the way they've played this year. I mean, I don't think that was me. A lot of the players have really stepped up. Johnny Hockey's looked pretty good. What's he got, 18, 19 points? Really been impressed with T.J. Brody, who's continued to excel in Calgary. Yeah, I'm going to say bye. I like the Flames this year, and I like what Brian Burke has done with the team.
I mean, I see the pieces there. I like Monahan. I think he's a really good young player. I like Gaudreau. But the thing is, I don't know if Yuri Hudler can keep scoring the way he's scoring right now, and I can't see Giordano scoring at a point-a-game pace for the rest of the year. I mean, I think he's having a fantastic year. Probably will be in the final 3 for the Norris. Brody signed a new deal, and he's playing really well, and they're getting great goaltending out of Hiller, and they're playing responsible defensively. But scoring, I think, eventually will be a problem. And I don't know that they have enough. If they have enough potency offensively to make it, so I'm going to sell, but they're going to make it close. And I see the path there for the Flames. I think there's a lot of progress there. I'm very impressed with the way that organization is going right now. And if you look at them and the Oilers, I mean, it's two sides of the same coin. It's unbelievable how different it is. Josh, what news do you got?
Actually, before we get to the news, I want to bring up something that I've been really impressed with, and that's Chris Versteeg. I mean, we saw him here in Toronto, and he, poo-pooed the bed, basically.
Yeah.
He wasn't any good. He hasn't been good for the last couple of years, but what he's been able to do in Chicago in the last 8 games, 14 points, 4 goals, 10 assists, 4 to 5 minutes on the power play each night, playing with Kane, and, not even strength, he's playing with Kane and Brad Richards, 17 to 19 minutes a game. Chris Versteeg looks like the Chris Versteeg of 6 years ago when he was with the Chicago Blackhawks, or maybe it was 5 years ago when he came out as a rookie and put up some big points. I mean, I've been really impressed with this guy.
Well, I think that the problem that happened when he got traded to Toronto and then Philadelphia and even to Florida after that is those teams were acquiring him with the eye of him being a top 6 forward and not being what I consider a complementary player, playing with talent. He plays better with talented players like Kane and Richards, but in Toronto they brought him in essentially to be the go-to guy on their second line, and he didn't work out, and he didn't work out in Philadelphia, and then the Florida situation was a disaster for him, and now he's back. He's making half the money that he was making because Florida's picking up half the tab, and he's playing with talented players, and he's a complimentary guy, and he's working well. That's the best thing for him. Russ, what do you think?
Versteeg is one of these guys that definitely runs hot and cold. I think everybody gets revitalized to some degree in Chicago. I mean, look at Brad Richards. I mean, he is a skilled guy, but at the end of the day, if you put him on almost any other team, he's not going to produce. So I think it's the Chicago and the Patrick Kane factor.
I'm going to enjoy that dinner from Eck when I win my 50-point bet at the end of this year, because I'm telling you right, Richards has got. What's that?
How many does he have right now?
I think he's got 18 or 19 right now. He's on
It's going to be a battle.
What's that?
It's going to be a battle.
Yeah, it's going to be very close. I'll bet you anything he ends up with 51 or 52. But I mean, if he's playing with Kane, he's going to get points. He had a point last night. I think he's scored a point. He's at a 3-game point streak. He's got 5 points in his last 3 games. It took him a little while to get used to things, but I thought that was a great acquisition for the money that they spent, which was $2 million. He's the number 2 center behind Jonathan Taves. Taves is going to take all the checking. He's going to take all the pressure, and if Richards is playing with Kane, he's just going to feed him the puck, and Kane will score like he did twice last night. So,
Mike, should we start calling you Ron McLean? Are you going to show up at his celebrity golf tournament next?
There you go. I'm pre-ordering my filet mignon and mashed potatoes. Okay.
I've got one food for thought question, and you guys could just answer yes or no. It's real simple, but I was looking at goalies of this era, right? They've been involved with the shootout for 10 years, and some of them even longer overseas, and we're wondering why, maybe Henrik Lundqvist is off to a slower start than usual, and I kind of wonder, with this format, with the overtime and with the stress that it puts on goalies with the shootout, and then I looked, and Lundqvist played 145 games in Frölunda, and how many of those had the shootout, and he's played in like 60-something shootout games in the NHL. Does that take a toll on a goalie? And because he used to be great in the shootout, and now he's not. I think it does.
I'm wondering when an NHL coach is going to take a page from Major League Baseball and go to a relief goaltender in a shootout, if that ever will happen. Because think of it, if the backup goaltender is good at shootouts and can get warm in the locker room or whatever. I mean, I know that most goaltenders, if they're in there for the overtime and they're in there for regulation, that they're going to want to stay in there. But with that point, Russ, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tries that, if somebody goes with that. Okay, Josh, give us some news.
All right, it's kind of a slow news day besides the stuff we already talked about, but I wanted to elaborate on more Oilers stuff here. Actually, Darren Dreger tweeting a couple of tweets out here in the last couple of minutes saying, I suspect the next few days will determine direction Oilers will go. Full forensic analysis from top to bottom will take place. A culture change is required, but does firing a coach and GM do that? Not if the team is fundamentally flawed. Tough decisions for the oil brass.
Ryan, I floated the name yesterday, and I want to get your feedback on this. With Bob Nicholson coming in as the overseer in Edmonton, his long history with Hockey Canada, a potential of somebody like a Brent Sutter coming in to the Oilers organization, somebody who works well with kids, who stresses a defensive system, is for lack of a better term, a hard ass. What's that, Russ?
And I mentioned them first.
You did. But what do you think, Ryan?
I just don't see it happening. I don't see it happening because the man in charge is Daryl Cates, the owner, the billionaire mogul, the recluse. I mean, we've got our own Howard Hughes up there in Edmonton, so it's I just don't see him going off the farm to bring in an outside guy like that. Yeah, Bob Nicholson, I think he's been involved more in some of the management side, not the hockey operations, but more of the business management side. And so people keep tying him into the hockey operations, but that's not really his role at all. And I don't think he's that interested in even touching the garbage fire that's going on with the Oilers roster right now. There's a lot of talk today. There's a lot of talk today about Mark Messier, something that was floated about 3 weeks ago, that the Oilers were planning to fire Dallas Aikens and install Moose behind the bench. You know what? At this point, how much worse could it get?
That is a disaster waiting to happen. First of all, I'm waiting for that.
Are you going to be an assistant coach?
No, I mean, what a disaster that would be. First of all, the 18-wheeler with the truckload of mason jars coming from Daryl Cates is on the way.
They've lost 11 in a row, Mike. They've lost 11 straight. People are looking positively. They're trying to pick out positives by saying, hey, at least the Oilers had 3 points in their last 4 games. You know what 3 points in your last 4 games gets you? A 60-point season if you can keep up that horrible pace.
I go with this. Harry Howell once told me, I think it was Harry Howell, that his worst coach was Bill Cook, and Bill Cook was the superstar of the NHL before Gretzky and Rocket Richard and everybody. Just because you're a superstar doesn't mean you can coach.
That's right.
I'm telling you, Mark Messier, not to slam all-star players, and we've heard Rocket Richard coached 1 game, I think it was in the WHA with Quebec. Wayne Gretzky was I think a dramatic failure with Phoenix when he was a head coach. Patrick Waugh is a pretty good head coach with Colorado, so it's not out of the question that a superstar player could be a good coach. But he's going in there. He doesn't have any coaching experience. He's going to go in there completely without experience and just try to lead from behind the bench. It doesn't work that way. I think it'll be a complete unmitigated disaster.
Hey, come on, Mike, come on. Have you ever watched the Mighty Ducks? Emilio didn't have any coaching experience, and he took that team to the Minnesota State Finals, so it can be done.
Yes, but he had a sumo wrestler as a goaltender.
Actually, it was Edgar Laprade too. I gave out the wrong name. I don't want to get Harry in trouble.
Okay, Josh, any more news?
Yes, one last thing. Poor Minnesota Wild. Ryan Suter now has the mumps.
Oh, jeez. What the hell is going on with the mumps in this league? And it's not just one team. I mean, Minnesota, Anaheim,
St. Louis.
St. Louis. I mean, yeah, it's bizarre.
Knock on wood, how have the Blue Jackets kept that away with everything they've gone through this year?
I mean, yeah, they should get an exorcist, the Blue Jackets, for all the injuries that they've had. I mean,
Eastmob's out now 2 to 3, or 2 to 3 weeks now.
No, 2 to 3 months. 2 to 3
months.
Oh, months. I thought it was weeks.
Jeez. Yeah, I know.
Injury.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, okay. Everybody should be watching. I think the St. Louis Nashville. If you have the center ice package, the St. Louis Nashville game tonight will be very interesting to see Marty Brodeur in his first game as a Blue. That's going to be weird to see. I'm not a Devils fan, so I don't really, I don't really care. But it will be weird to see him in a different jersey than a New Jersey Devils jersey, and To
me, he's the best goalie ever, so it'll be odd.
See, we didn't talk about the big trade today, too.
Oh yeah, the Jesse Blacker, Colby. Yeah, that was yeah. There you go. There was the big move for Anaheim to go get a veteran defenseman. They traded Jesse Blacker, who by the way they traded in the Peter Holland deal with Toronto last year, and Peter Holland's played pretty well, and Jesse Blacker has played one NHL game.
There was a lot of hype to him too when he was in the Leafs organization.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he could have been an NHL player, and he just seems to have taken, gone on, fallen back the last couple of years. But Josh, they traded him for, what was it, Colby Rolak? Is that it?
It was Colby Roback.
Roback.
Oh, Roback. Yeah.
And sorry, it was Blacker and a conditional pick for Roback.
Yeah, so I mean, with all the injuries, Anaheim, they've lost. Stoner's going to be out a couple more weeks with the mumps. They've lost Boschman for probably a month with a broken finger.
They lost Brewer after they traded for him the first game.
Yeah, so it's just it just keeps going. But anyway, great show, guys. Really appreciate you coming on on short notice. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Russ Cohen, for Ryan Garner, for Josh Rimmer, I am Michael Agello. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.